Someone in your life is manipulating you right now. And the most terrifying part? You don't even know it's happening. You think it's your choice. You think it's your idea. You think you're in control, but you're not. You never were. The people who understand dark psychology have already decided how this conversation ends. They already know what you'll say next. They already know how to make you feel exactly what they want you to feel. And until today, you had no defense against it. But after this video, the game changes, because now you're going to see it, all of it. Most people go through their entire lives never understanding why things happen to them, why they always end up in the same situations, why certain people always seem to win, why they feel drained after conversations they thought were normal, why they agree to things they never actually wanted. They blame bad luck, they blame circumstances, they blame themselves. But they never look at the real reason. The real reason is that most of the world is playing a game you were never taught to play. Dark psychology is not a myth. It is not a movie concept. It is not reserved for criminals and con artists. It is operating right now in your office, in your relationships, in your social circles, in your family. It is the invisible hand behind decisions you thought you made freely. It is the quiet architecture behind emotions you believed were your own. The men and women who understand this are not necessarily evil. Some of them do not even know they are doing it consciously. They have simply developed, through experience or education, an instinct for human behavior. They know how the mind works. They know what it fears. They know what it craves. And they use that knowledge to navigate the world in a way most people cannot comprehend. Machiavelli wrote centuries ago that the world is not governed by virtue. It is governed by perception, by leverage, by the ability to understand what a man wants, and then position yourself as the only path to it. He was not writing fiction. He was writing observation. He was documenting what he saw in the courts of power, in the halls of influence, in the quiet rooms where real decisions were made. Dark psychology is that observation put into practice. It begins with a simple truth that most people refuse to accept. Every human being has vulnerabilities. Every person walking this earth carries wounds, fears, insecurities, and desires that they would never openly confess. These are not weaknesses to be ashamed of. They are simply part of being human. But when someone else identifies those vulnerabilities before you even realize they exist, the balance of power in any relationship shifts instantly and entirely. This is the foundation of dark psychology, not cruelty, not evil, just the ruthless understanding of human nature. There are specific psychological tools that have been used throughout history to influence, control, and direct human behavior. Most people encounter them daily without recognizing them. Understanding them does not make you dangerous. It makes you protected. The first is reciprocity. The human brain is wired with a deep, almost uncontrollable need to return what it receives. When someone does something for you, gives you something, compliments you, helps you with something small and seemingly insignificant, your brain immediately registers a debt. Not a financial debt. A social and psychological debt. And until that debt is paid, you are vulnerable. You will agree to things you would normally refuse. You will give more than you receive. You will bend your boundaries not because you want to, but because your own biology is driving you toward balance. The dark practitioner knows this. They give first, always. Small gifts, small gestures, small favors. And then, when the time is right, they collect, not once, over and over. Machiavelli understood this dynamic perfectly. He wrote that generosity used strategically is more powerful than generosity born from kindness. Because genuine generosity expects nothing. Strategic generosity collects everything. The second weapon is manufactured scarcity. The human mind does not want what is freely available. It wants what is disappearing, what is limited, what might be gone tomorrow. This is not a character flaw. It is a survival instinct built into the brain over thousands of years of evolution. When resources were scarce, the mind that moved quickly survived. The mind that hesitated did not. That instinct has not disappeared. It has simply been redirected. When someone tells you this is the last opportunity, when someone implies you might lose access, when someone creates a sense of now or never, they are not informing you. They are engineering your decision. They are using your own brain against you. And it works every single time on the people who do not recognize it. The third weapon is social proof. You are a social creature. You evolved in groups. And the brain of a group creature is constantly scanning for information about what other members of the group are doing. Not because you are weak, because in a world of uncertain information, the behavior of others served as a guide to survival. If everyone in the tribe ran, you ran. You did not stop to ask questions. Questions took time. Time could cost your life. That instinct is still running inside you right now. When someone shows you that everyone else is choosing them, everyone else is agreeing with them, everyone else is following them, your brain automatically leans in that direction. Not because you have been convinced by logic, because you have been triggered by a biological drive older than language itself. The fourth weapon is authority. The brain assigns more credibility, more trust, and more compliance to perceived experts, leaders, and figures of authority. This is another evolved response. Learning from those with more experience was adaptive. Questioning the tribe elder on every decision was not efficient, so the brain learned to shortcut, to assign credibility based on signals. Titles, uniforms, confidence, specific vocabulary, physical presence. When someone triggers these signals, intentionally or unintentionally, your brain begins to lower its defenses. You accept information more readily. You comply more easily. You question less. The Dark Practitioner uses this not by becoming a genuine authority, but by performing one. The performance is often enough. Because the brain responds to signals, not to underlying reality. The fifth weapon is liking. You are more easily influenced by people you like. This is obvious enough that most people dismiss it as unimportant. That dismissal is exactly what makes it so dangerous. The level of influence created by liking is not small. It is enormous. People give more to those they like. They forgive more. They comply more. They trust more. They ignore red flags more readily. They overlook inconsistencies they would never forgive in someone they did not like. The Dark Practitioner builds liking deliberately, mirroring your body language, your speech patterns, your values, finding common ground, real or manufactured, using your name, remembering details about your life. These are not signs of genuine connection. They are tools of influence. And because they trigger the same neurological response as genuine connection, your brain cannot tell the difference. The sixth weapon is commitment and consistency. Once a person makes a decision, any decision, they will go to extraordinary lengths to remain consistent with that decision. Not because the decision was necessarily right, but because the brain experiences inconsistency as a threat to identity. And the threat to identity produces the same stress response as a physical threat. When someone gets you to make a small commitment, any small commitment, they have already set the trap, because your own need for self-consistency will do the rest of the work for them. They do not need to push you toward the outcome they want. Your own psychology will pull you there. These 6 weapons are not theories. They are documented, replicated, and observed across cultures, across history, across every domain of human interaction. And they are being used on you right now. Beyond specific tactics, dark psychology recognizes a cluster of personality traits that, when combined, produce some of the most effective, most dangerous, and most difficult to detect manipulators in human experience. Researchers call it the Dark Triad. The first component is narcissism, not the casual narcissism of someone who likes attention, deep, structural narcissism. A person who sees others not as full human beings, but as instruments, as resources, as audiences. Their relationships are not built on connection, they are built on utility. The people around them exist to reflect their greatness back to them, to provide what they need, to serve the vision of themselves they have constructed. When you are useful, they are warm, generous, attentive. When you are not, you do not exist. This alternating pattern, warmth and coldness, attention and abandonment, creates a psychological dependency in the people around them that most victims take years to understand and even longer to escape. The second component is Machiavellianism, a cold, calculating approach to social interaction built on the belief that people are fundamentally self-interested and therefore can be predicted, managed, and directed. The Machiavellian thinker is always 3 moves ahead. They are patient in ways that seem almost inhuman. They do not react emotionally to situations. They respond strategically. They treat every conversation as a negotiation, every relationship as an asset, every piece of information as either useful or worthless. They are extraordinarily good at reading people because they have spent their lives studying what people want, what people fear, and how those 2 forces can be leveraged. The third component is psychopathy, not the dramatic, violent psychopathy of cinema, functional psychopathy. A reduced emotional response to the distress of others, combined with a high tolerance for risk and a remarkable ability to remain calm under pressure. The functional psychopath does not hesitate where others freeze. They do not feel the social friction that stops most people from saying or doing what serves their interests. They can make decisions that most people would find paralyzingly difficult, and make them quickly, coldly, and without the guilt that would slow a person of normal empathology. In a world that rewards decisive, unsentimental action, this is not always a disadvantage. When these 3 traits exist together in the same person, the result is someone who sees you clearly, feels no obligation toward you, and possesses the patience and strategic clarity to move you exactly where they want you to go. Understanding this is not about living in fear. It is about knowing the terrain. The most sophisticated manipulators do not enter your life dramatically. They do not arrive with warnings. They arrive exactly when you are most open, most vulnerable, most in need of what they appear to offer. They study you before they approach you, not necessarily consciously, but through instinct, through practice, through the refined pattern recognition that comes from years of studying and exploiting human behavior. They identify what you are missing, what you are longing for, what wound has not healed, and then they present themselves as the answer to that specific, unspoken need. If you are lonely, they are the most genuinely interested person you have ever met. If you are insecure, they are the most validating presence you have encountered. If you are ambitious, they are the connection to everything you have been trying to reach. They mirror not just your behavior, but your hunger. And because that mirror shows you something you desperately want to see, you open the door. This is the entry point. The first impression is engineered, not accidental. The warmth is calibrated, not genuine. The timing is strategic, not coincidental. But because it feels real, because it produces real emotions in you, the distinction barely matters. Your nervous system does not verify sources, it simply responds. And the moment it responds with trust, with openness, with connection, the dark practitioner has what they need. From that point, the process unfolds slowly, gradually, almost imperceptibly. They accumulate information about you, not through interrogation, but through seemingly casual conversation. Every detail you share is catalogued: your fears, your ambitions, your past failures, your family dynamics, your relationship history, your financial situation, your emotional triggers. This information is not stored out of affection. It is stored as leverage, as a map of your vulnerabilities that can be returned to whenever it becomes useful. They test your boundaries early. Small violations first, things so minor that objecting to them feels unreasonable. If you push back, they calibrate. If you accept, they note it and push further next time. This is not random. It is systematic, methodical. It is the patient erosion of your sense of what is normal and acceptable until what once would have alarmed you now feels ordinary. Machiavelli observed that a man who allows a small wrong to go unchallenged invites a larger one, because the person watching for resistance, finding none, concludes that more is possible. Here is what the manipulator cannot survive: awareness, not anger, not confrontation, not drama, simply the quiet, unshakable awareness of what is actually happening. When you understand the tactics, they lose their invisibility, and a tactic that has lost its invisibility has lost most of its power. Reciprocity cannot capture you if you recognize when a gift is strategic rather than genuine. Manufactured scarcity cannot rush you if you identify the artificial pressure before it produces a decision. Social proof cannot direct you if you understand that what most people do and what you should do are completely separate questions. But awareness alone is not sufficient. The mind, even an aware mind, can be temporarily overwhelmed. Fatigue, emotional distress, loneliness, stress, any of these states reduces cognitive resistance and increases vulnerability. The dark practitioner times their moves precisely for these moments. Not because they are watching you specifically, but because they have learned that people in compromised emotional states are more pliable, and they know how to create those states or how to wait for them. The real defense, therefore, is not just intellectual. It is structural. It is the building of an inner world that is not easily disturbed. A sense of identity that does not require external validation to remain stable. A relationship with your own emotions that is intimate enough that you notice when they are being artificially produced. When you are genuinely calm, when you genuinely know what you want, when you genuinely do not need what someone appears to be offering, the entire architecture of manipulation loses its foundation. This is what Machiavelli meant when he distinguished between the prince who rules through fortune and the one who rules through his own virtue, his own strength of character. The one who depends on fortune, who depends on external circumstances being favorable, is always vulnerable. The one who has built his power through his own discipline, through his own clarity, through his own psychological fortitude, cannot be easily displaced. The person who needs approval cannot be controlled by the threat of withdrawal. The person who has no hunger for validation cannot be manipulated with the promise of it. The person who is genuinely comfortable with solitude cannot be cornered by the fear of abandonment. Your invulnerability is not built by protecting against attack. It is built by removing the targets. There is one final dimension of dark psychology that most discussions ignore, and it is perhaps the most important. You are not simply a potential victim, you are also a practitioner. Not necessarily a dark one, but a practitioner of influence, of persuasion, of the management of how others perceive you. Every person does this. Every person presents a version of themselves designed, consciously or not, to produce a particular effect on others. Every person calibrates their communication based on what they read in the people around them. Every person has, at some point, withheld information to maintain an advantage, emphasized certain traits to appear more appealing, or used emotional intelligence to guide a situation toward a preferred outcome. The question is not whether you use psychology in your interactions with others. The question is whether you use it with awareness, with responsibility, and with a genuine respect for the autonomy and dignity of the people around you. Understanding dark psychology does not invite you to become a predator. It invites you to become an observer of yourself as much as of others. To notice when your own motivations are unclear, when your own behavior is driven by wounds rather than wisdom, when your own tactics are producing outcomes that you would not choose if you examined them honestly. The most dangerous practitioners of dark psychology are those who have no awareness of their own darkness, who cause damage not from calculated malice, but from profound, unexamined self-interest, who manipulate not as a strategy, but as a habit so deeply ingrained that it has become invisible even to them. The most powerful position you can occupy is the one that sees both. The position of clear self-knowledge combined with clear knowledge of others, not to control, not to exploit, but to navigate, to protect. To choose your engagements with full information and full awareness. To stop being moved by forces you cannot see and start moving by forces you have consciously chosen. Machiavelli's deepest lesson was not about cunning, it was about clarity. The ruler who sees the world as it is, not as he wishes it to be, is the only ruler capable of making decisions that actually serve his interests and ultimately his people. Sentiment is not the enemy of wisdom, illusion is. there is one technique that sits at the intersection of dark psychology and self-mastery. One tool that the most powerful practitioners use in every room, every conversation, every negotiation. And it costs nothing. It requires no words. It produces no aggression. It is simply silence used with intention. Most people are terrified of silence. The brain interprets it as rejection, as disapproval, as failure. So when silence enters a conversation, the average person rushes to fill it. They talk faster. They offer more information than they intended to share. They make concessions they had not planned to make. They reveal their anxiety, their desperation, their uncertainty. And the person sitting across from them, the one who allowed that silence to form and then held it, now knows everything they need to know. The deliberate pause is not passive. It is one of the most aggressive moves available in any conversation, precisely because it looks like nothing at all. When someone makes you an offer and you say nothing, their mind begins to work against them. They start questioning whether the offer was good enough. They start improving it without being asked. They start filling the silence with concessions. You have not said a word. You have not pushed back. You have simply waited. And waiting, when done with composure rather than uncertainty, is a form of pressure that most people cannot withstand. Machiavelli wrote that the prince who speaks less is credited with more wisdom than the one who speaks often. Not because silence is inherently wise, but because silence forces others to project wisdom onto you. They cannot hear your doubts. They cannot find your weaknesses. They cannot measure the gap between what you know and what you pretend to know. In the absence of information, the human mind creates a story. And in your composed silence, the story it creates is almost always more powerful than anything you could have said. The silent man makes others reveal themselves. The silent man makes others negotiate against themselves. The silent man creates a gravity that words can never build, because words can be challenged, but silence has no edges to push against. Learn to sit inside discomfort without escaping into noise. Learn to let the moment stretch past the point where most people break. Learn that every time you hold silence when everything in you wants to speak, you are building the one muscle that separates the person who is controlled from the person who controls. That muscle is discipline. And discipline, exercised in silence over time without audience or applause, is the deepest foundation of real psychological power. When you genuinely understand dark psychology, something shifts, not into cynicism, not into a cold, suspicious relationship with every person you encounter. What shifts is the quality of your attention. You begin to notice things you could not see before, the slight inconsistency between what someone says and what their body communicates, the pattern in how a person behaves when they want something from you versus when they do not, the way certain conversations leave you feeling smaller, more uncertain, more in need of the person you were just speaking with. The way some people always seem to be the exception to your boundaries, always seem to deserve special treatment, always seem to leave you wondering what you did wrong, even when you did nothing wrong at all. You begin to ask different questions. Not just what is this person doing, but why. Not just what is being said, but what is being communicated. Not just what do I feel in this moment, but where did this feeling come from, and is it mine? And perhaps most importantly, you begin to make different choices. About who you allow close to you, about what information you share and when and with whom, about where your time and energy go, about which battles are worth your engagement and which are simply designed to distract you, drain you, or destabilize you. The man or woman who understands dark psychology does not live in fear. They live with precision. They do not see enemies everywhere. They see dynamics everywhere. And because they see dynamics, they are no longer unconsciously subject to them. This is not a small thing. In a world where influence is everywhere, where attention is a commodity, where every interaction carries a dimension of negotiation, the person who sees clearly holds an extraordinary advantage. Not over others. Over the version of themselves that could be led, manipulated, and directed without ever realizing it. You have just seen what most people will never take the time to understand. The invisible forces that shape decisions, the psychological architecture behind influence, the tools being used on you every day. and the one defense that never fails, to see clearly. This is not the end of the conversation. It is the beginning of a different kind of attention, the kind that changes how you read a room, how you understand a relationship, how you protect your time, your energy, and your direction from people who will use all three without asking. If this challenged the way you see the world around you, leave a comment. Tell me what you recognized. Tell me the moment something clicked. Because the best conversations happen in the space between people who are finally willing to see the truth about how this world actually works. And if you want to go deeper, if you want to understand the full psychological framework behind power, influence, and self-mastery, my book, Guided by the Greats, A Path to Self-Growth, is linked in the pinned comment and in the description below. It is your next step toward seeing clearly, moving deliberately, and becoming the kind of person that influence cannot touch. Real power does not flinch. Real power does not chase. Real power sees everything and reveals only what it chooses to reveal. That is what you are becoming. Now, let's keep going.